Hi, Neil Wadhwani. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Roy. How are you?
Very good. So, first, I'll just start with a short introduction for Neil and we'll jump in. We have Neil with us, who's kind enough to participate in this episode of the Fireside Chat for Spotlight. Neil has over 25 years experience in technology and sales, pre-sales, IT ops, digital marketing, various executive leadership roles. You spend time in high growth and enterprises, companies such as Microsoft, Adobe, right? AppDynamics. We know a lot of joint people, common people from AppD, and now in MongoDB, you're leading all of the both the value consulting and all the SEs for the Americas. And I'm really, really happy to have the chat with you, Neil, today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been an amazing career. It's been just a tremendous amount of fun, just constant learning and growing, and everything you want out of tech and everything you want out of a career. So I feel very blessed. So thank you.
So, Neil, let's jump in. And, the question I always start with, and you're coming to it from a very unique angle because you see both the sales pre-sales angle as well as the value consultant angle. But what is value selling for you just as a term?
Well, that's a very broad question, a very big question. So let's think about this. I mean, when you think about value selling, you're trying to go beyond the surface level and not just look at basic requirements. You really need to find the assessment. You need to be able to identify strategic goals, customer pain points, and really need to go to that next level. And not just getting the overview context, really getting into the operational context. The other thing when I think about value selling is you need to customize positioning and speak the customer's language. So you need to map your product to the customer's outcomes. And that's where the differentiators come in. So more specifically, if I think about it from the way we think about it in MongoDB, we think about a solution that addresses a customer's unique challenges, but more specifically, what are the required capabilities that MongoDB can help them assess? So above and beyond that, honestly, when you think about the way technology has evolved, I mean, we always talk about landing and expanding. What it essentially means is an ongoing partnership. So it's constantly and continuously revisiting and validating what we started with on the purchase of what that customer purchased. Like, how do we continue to drive that? And I think it changes the conversation. It changes the conversation from here's what we sell to here's how can we partner and how can we succeed. And I think that's really what value selling is for me.
You've invested quite a lot in MongoDB in value selling, both in people, in the assets that you're creating, and you have a whole team of value consultants that support this practice. But coming from the SE role perspective, what's the SE role in all of this reality, specifically in MongoDB, but also beyond?
I don't actually see a delineation, and let me clarify that. If I heard the question correctly, is from a sales engineering perspective, we call them solution architects in MongoDB, but essentially industry-wide solution consultant, sales engineering, solution architect. So I may use those terms interchangeably. But when I think of, what is an SA's role at MongoDB in the value selling motion, sales engineers or solution architects are generally the tip of the spear when we connect with a customer. We're usually the first with a rep to get engaged. And we're involved heavily in deep discovery, diagnosis of pain points. We're there early on in the sales process. And then we continue through that process doing, technical translation to business needs. So, in our case, we really want to document like what's the value driver of MongoDB and what are the required capabilities of MongoDB to meet the customer's outcomes. You want to basically change the narrative from just a proof of concept to a value-driven either demonstration or a value concept, so a proof of value as opposed to a proof of concept. So not just meeting benchmark needs, but mapping those needs to business value. And if we think about the qualification impact that we do, MongoDB uses a command to the message model. We're using, command to the message along with Medic. And the essays at MongoDB, and even at my previous organizations, are instrumental in helping to qualify the benefits of the solution. And we're using things like just performance benchmark, ROI calculators, industry data, and we use this to help articulate kind of not only a technical, but a financial and operational benefit that the customer gains. And that's really one of the reasons we started down the path with looking at scaling the value realization solutions that we have today. I want to kind of go back to value realization 1 second, because MongoDB has moved to a world of consumption, which a lot of customers are heading towards. So the hyperscalers are already doing it. For that to occur, you have to have a very solid product that works, because you're only paid if the customer uses it, which really drives, the engagement of the pre-sale to post-sale, which I think the newer world is heading towards. CS and post-sale engagement is a big part of retaining customers and continuing to identify opportunities to scale as well.
And actually, one of our previous episodes was with Gennady, who's running customer experience, and we were talking exactly about that, how post-sale value realization and pre-sale, value discovery and selling is so tied together. So what's the vision that you have going from a value consultants with some assistance with the SEs? What's the vision for this combined practice?
So as I think about the modern sales engineer, right, when we talk about what we have today in the world of consumption, they not only integrate the technical how, but they really think about the strategic why a customer is using our solution and how they continue to move forward with that. Now, as I mentioned a moment ago, like I do look at sales engineers of today as the tip of the spear. So they have the ability to identify metrics early on, out of the gate. When I think about utilizing Spotlight, because we have obviously procured Spotlight. When I think about Spotlight, I'm looking to use it in highly transactional use cases out of the gate, but I am also looking to expand the solution in the future. It is interesting, like all organizations, there are highly transactional opportunities, and there are opportunities that from an enterprise grade level that take a large amount of investment. How do I continue to scale our value consultants without adding more bodies? And I feel that Spotlight gives us an opportunity to give a lot of time back to our value consultants based on allowing an automated solution. And we can get into the specific use case if you'd like, but really an ability to automate a lot of the highly transactional volume that our value consultants are dealing with today, giving them an opportunity to focus on the really higher level engagements.
So what was the reason you chose Spotlight from an SA perspective, not from a value perspective?
That was a long journey. And so I'll tell you, when we started, we actually we didn't fully evaluate, but we looked at 12 different solutions. I'll give you the simple answer, and then I'll get into the complex answer. The simple answer is most of the UIs that I looked at were designed for value consultants and not the general population. They had a clunky UI. Spotlight's UI is modern, very intuitive for a non-value consultant, which I thought was interesting. It was easily customizable. A lot of the vendors that we looked at would give us the solution, but if we needed to make any changes or modify or even just basic configuration, we had to go through them. And that having a bottleneck like that and being able to be agile goes against the belief of being able to move fast and move quickly and move forward. Spotlight had a modern UI. It was intuitive. You were also willing to work with us to be able to meet us where we needed to be. So similar to that I mentioned above, where we work with our customers to understand their business outcomes. You took the time to understand why and what our business outcomes were, and you were also able to modify your solution configuration wise, not fully ramped, but to meet our needs, which I thought was extremely beneficial. So that was, those were the kind of the initial highlights. Obviously, we went through an extensive validation of the technology. We went through an extensive validation of the use cases. We had our internal value consultants work with your team to understand the use cases and how we can actually expedite it and make it a viable option for our sales engineers.
So Spotlight is one aspect where you're harnessing AI for the outcomes that you want to see in the next few years. when you look at the maturity of AI, one of the things that when I talk about how is the salesperson and the pre-sale person going to look in the next few years, I think we'll be going from 100% of execution to a portion of that time spent on orchestrating technologies and not just executing manually, serially. And so when you look at the maturity of AI and the orchestration of AI capabilities for this role, for the next, I don't know, 2 years, let's say, what are the other areas you see AI impacting the SA role?
That is an incredible question. It's a great. Let me start with my caveat, or first, only time will tell. So the predictions and the ideas that are going to follow on are just things that I've been thinking about. I'm sure you've been thinking about over the last 24 months with the advent of ChatGPT and Bard and Claude. Like, we have just seen a shift in the way people work. There's a number of statistics out there that show almost every knowledge worker is using some sort of AI in their day-to-day work today. And that just didn't exist 24 months ago. So I will also say the world of AI kind of feels like, I mean, you're old enough to remember 1999 and the dot-com era, and it kind of feels like that. There's a lot of excitement. You know it's going to do something. You know things are going to change. You're already identifying areas of efficiency. That being said, I can see solutions like really advanced natural language processing solutions, things like ChatGPT and advanced search features and live listening solutions. I don't know if you're familiar with the term live listening, but it's essentially transcription-based, real-time AI feeds. And live listening solution increasing efficiency across the entire sales cycle. And I think, if I boil it down to a sales cycle, let's continue to use the live listening solution. A simple example would be having a live listening solution actually auto-populate the information that Spotlight needs to produce an output, to provide an even quicker, output designed for the customer. But I can even see that kind of moving into sentiment analysis of the opportunity, sentiment analysis of the individual that you're working with. I mean, those are just off the top of my head. I'm sure I can get into more use cases, but I wanted to tie it specifically to Spotlight just based, on our conversation today.
Yeah. I think, one of the things that we're talking about is when you're listening to a customer, if you're a good listener, you listen on multiple layers, right? You listen to the right signals that you're looking for. You're trying to map what's happening to a progress in the deal that needs to happen. You're trying to listen to the sentiment, right? You're understanding the level of engagement. And so there's like layers that if you're aware of all these layers, you basically synthesize those and say, okay, this deal is at a good state. We've made progress. There's good engagement. The sentiment is where it needs to be. One of the layers without the others is a blind spot. So you need to integrate those in a way. And I think you're alluding to that, which is, as you listen in, you're actually adding an additional component, which is a feedback back to the same conversation live as you're picking up on these signals.
And like I said, time will tell. And I'm sure the things that you and I are even just thinking about is just scratching the surface.
Look, we're finishing the year. Everybody likes to finish the year and think about the goal for next year. But I always like to also try and look back on 24 and say, if I had to give myself an advice at the beginning of the year, what's the one thing, and it can be 2 years, but what's the scar related to value selling? What is the one scar that you say, this is a lessons learned for me from the last, year, 2 years, that if I would do it again, I would learn from that, do it differently?
Okay, so if I think about the scars generally occur when we have blinders on. And let me share a little bit about any sales cycle, right? Sales in general, can be built on a relationship. They can be built on value. Value, in my opinion, has legs to stand on that you can then continue to move either horizontally or vertically within a customer's organization. When built on relationships, over time, people, myself included, tend to get rose-colored glasses. And if I had to go back in the last 2 years, where I would probably tell myself to constantly reflect is this conversation a value-driven conversation, or is it a relationship-driven conversation? And if it's a relationship-driven conversation, what happens if that relationship was to splinter? How would that affect our business today? So it's probably good advice for the future as well. But upon reflection, those are probably some of the biggest things that you run into.
And it also, I think, touches back on, am I listening for progress, or am I listening for sentiment, or am I building a relationship, or am I making progress, which is based on where we want to be. Amazing, Neil. Thank you so much for this. Looking forward to the continued partnership of the two companies, and happy to have you anytime again.
Thank you, and enjoy the holiday season that's coming up.